I am not here to tell you what your needs need to be for your team to get better this week. But what I am telling you is that this waiver wire in week 3 fantasy football, you need to be a little bit more careful on this week because there are plenty of landmines out there and everything needs to be taken into context. And I'm doing everything I can to get us ready for week 3 fantasy football. So please go down there and drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Now I want to go through our running backs first because I will say this, the 2 running backs that I have as the key pickups, I think are landmines in their own right, but can serve a purpose on your roster if you are in certain positions. So obviously the first one, who's not on the majority of waivers, but is on some, is Judkins of the Cleveland Browns. Now with Judkins, what was really interesting about what he did today was that Judkins basically came out and led the backfield immediately for the Cleveland Browns. He had 10 carries for 61 yards. So that's actually a really good clip right there. 10 carries for 61 yards is 6.1 yards per carry. And Judkins also caught 3 passes for 10 yards. Now, if you look at the next best running back, right, that was Jerome Ford, who got 6 carries for 31 yards and 5.2 yards per carry. And then Dylan Sampson really didn't do much of all today, except at the end of the game when he basically got a garbage time touchdown from Dylan Gabriel. Overall, if you look back to last week, in week 1, the RB usage that you could find on fsroundup.com for free, what you could see is the backfield was already split, right? Now, obviously with Judkins coming back, that's going to be their main guy. But my whole point is we already saw that in week 2, in Quinshon's first week back. Now, Judkins, I'm not here to tell you, is going to handle 85 to 90% of the workload next week, but I am telling you it's going to happen at some point or another. They cannot afford to not play Judkins, who I was not big on because of all the issues that were surrounding him, but as long as he's not getting suspended, Judkins will be an important piece to this offense, and they will play easier matchups. So Judkins should not be on waivers. I don't care what kind of roster you have. You need to make room for Judkins, if only to play keep away. Now with Tuten, who is my second running back to go pick up, I do think this one has potential to be a landmine for you. Now let me go through the positives. If you're in a situation where you've got running back uncertainty and you've got some running backs in ambiguous rooms that have split backfields right now, such as the Minnesota Vikings, such as the Seattle Seahawks, for example, I do think Tuten has room on your roster to give you more upside. Because what Tuten did today was not get a ton of work, right? Tuten was not getting tons of work because this is still Travis Etienne's backfield. Make no mistake about this one. But what Tuten did was come out and be really efficient on a per touch basis. So he had 8 carries for 42 yards at 5.2 yards per carry, and he also had 2 catches for 32 yards and a touchdown as well. So Tuten on 10 touches had over 70 yards and a touchdown in this game. That's really good efficiency right there from a running back who just had the backfield opened up for him when Tank Bixby was jettisoned off to Philadelphia. Now, do I think that he's going to overtake Travis Etienne or even bite into his workload enough to be consistently relevant like this? I don't. And I do think that it's needed to be in context again that they played the Cincinnati Bengals defense. Of course, they were going to put up points and big yardage on that defense right there. But what happens when they play a defense like the Baltimore Ravens or the Minnesota Vikings, for example? I don't think that he's going to be much of anything. So I do think in that sense, he becomes a landmine here. Because let's not forget, this still is Jacksonville, and I do believe that over time, they're not going to be able to keep up with this amount of points on a weekly basis with Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. I acknowledge that he does have utility on certain situations. If you have ambiguous backfields and you need upside, Tuten is worth rostering. However, if you are very set at running back and you're more looking for a wide receiver add, Tuten is in no way, shape, or form a must add, and in that sense, he is a landmine for your team. Now, getting into our wide receivers, and I do think that there's a lot of good players to have, starting with Troy Franklin, who I do not consider a landmine whatsoever. I said this leading into last week, and I said this leading into the season. I think Troy Franklin is going to be a good player in fantasy this year. What we have seen from Denver is that Bo Nix, when he is on, and he was back on Sunday versus the Indianapolis Colts, A wide receiver 2 in this offense is very viable in this offense. Now, what we have learned over the first 2 weeks is that Troy Franklin is that guy. Because if you look back to week 1 alone, on FS Roundup and the snap counts and the routes run in Denver, Troy Franklin was right up there with Courtland Sutton, basically, just right behind him as the clear wide receiver 2 if you take out Marvin Mims, who is more of a gadget player. Troy Franklin is a true number 2 wide receiver for the Denver Broncos. And of course, Troy Franklin has an absolutely excellent day in fantasy football, where he goes to Indianapolis, right? And Indianapolis, I still don't think has that great of a defense, but what he essentially does is he goes into Indianapolis and is the wide receiver 1 for this team. 8 catches for 89 yards and a touchdown. Now again, I'm not saying that he's going to be the number 1 over Courtland Sutton all of a sudden, but what we have is a couple things here to work for. Number 1, Troy Franklin has built-in chemistry with Bo Nix because they both played at the University of Oregon in 2023. This was chemistry built back in college, and Troy Franklin stepping into his own as an NFL wide receiver is helping that come to fruition. And number 2, even though Courtland Sutton had a bad day on Sunday, I still believe that this is one of those situations where we can have both of those guys coexist in fantasy football and both feed off each other a little bit more. We still haven't seen Bo Nix reach his full potential yet. I truly believe this. 206 passing yards is just not the ceiling for him. I think he's a 300-yard thrower in certain weeks this season, and if that's going to be the case, then Troy Franklin needs to be on rostered. Now again, Troy Franklin is 2% rostered. I said he was a pickup last week, and now he's even more of a pickup this week, and I guarantee you he's going to be tougher. So you need to automate your waiver pickups with fsroundup.com. And I got a really cool comment the other day that exactly expresses the value of the waiver wire tool. Our Westbrook came in and told us, hey man, I'm on the West Coast. I got a text from the buddy on the East Coast, and he was like, how the heck did you pick up my waiver wire guy before I did early this morning? Well, it's because he's using FS Roundup to automate his waiver selections. The good guys to get after the initial waiver wire run happens, a lot of those guys are picked up as free agents. And what we do is we automate that process and we automatically grab the player that you want and put him on your team while everyone else is sleeping or trying to wake themselves up really early. So this is a game changer for the waiver wire in fantasy football. And if you don't use it, you're going to end up like a guy like this.
This is Ted. Look at him. Ted desperately needs to pick up a new running back, or his fantasy team is toast. For the 3rd year in a row. And losing his season again means one thing.
Oh no.
Don't be Ted. Use Fantasy Football Roundup to automate your waiver pickups and rest easy this season. Huh. Look at him.
Now, the next wide receiver that I want to go through is Romeo Doubs of the Green Bay Packers. And again, I think this has potential to be a landmine, but I would say that he's the better Green Bay wide receiver over Dontavian Wicks, who we will discuss here in a little bit. So Romeo Doubs is 20.3% rostered in ESPN leagues right now. So he is widely available. And I think one of the most important factors heading into this discussion is the fact that Jaden Reed is going to miss significant time because of a broken collarbone. So he has been placed on IR already, and reports are that he's going to be out anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks. So he will miss extended time on the IR with that broken collarbone. So essentially what you're looking for in Green Bay is a guy to step up, right? Now, Tucker Kraft was that guy. He had 6 catches, 124 yards, and a touchdown. He will continue to be involved. So if you have Tucker Kraft, you keep playing him as your lead tight end. But the wide receiver position is still very fruitful for the Green Bay Packers with Jordan Love as their quarterback, who he has not also hit his ceiling as well. As far as right now goes, if you just look back to the past 2 weeks for the Green Bay Packers, what we have seen here on fsroundup.com is Romeo Doubs is consistently being their wide receiver one as far as snap count percentage goes and as far as routes run on a weekly basis for Green Bay. But it is really important stuff because it shows you opportunities that are available. And with Jayden Reed gone, that's one less target that Jordan Love actually prefers to throw to quite a bit. Romeo Doubs is way more consistently involved than Dontavian Wicks, who is the next guy to pick up, and he is the landmine here. Dontavian Wicks is 0.2% roster, but you can expect that number to go up this week. I've got to tell you, unless you are extraordinarily desperate in a deep league or you have some injuries at the wide receiver position, I do not think you should be touching Dontavian Wicks. Dontavian Wicks last year was a big waiver wire addition one week, and he was a bust the rest of the season because this is how the Green Bay wide receiver room goes. Now, again, if you look at involvement on a weekly basis on FS Roundup, Dontavian Wicks is simply just not that much involved. In week one, particularly when Jayden Reed was healthy and out there playing for the Green Bay Packers. There's way too many moving parts here with this one, and I think over this time, we will start to see more of Matthew Golden than we will of Dontavian Wicks on a more consistent basis. I think you should stay pretty far away from Dontavian Wicks. Now, Ayomanor is going to be our next pickup here, and I actually think this is a winning move for your team. Now, I discussed Ayomanor last week on the waiver video as well as more of someone you should probably watch for because I didn't believe that we were at that position yet to where I could confidently say he needs to be rostered at this moment in time because one thing was made clear in week one alone, and what that was is that this is their number 2 wide receiver. Ayomanor is absolutely Tennessee's wide receiver 2 in this offense right here. Now, last week it didn't pan out, but this week it did. He gets in the end zone and has 4 catches for 56 yards, outproducing Calvin Ridley. I am not here to tell you that he's the wide receiver 1 over Calvin Ridley, but what I am here to tell you is that Cam Ward is going to have a break in schedule at some point to where I believe he's going to be playing better football. And what we have seen this week already is that Ayomanor, the hype that's been around him in sleeper corners of the fantasy community, that hype is about to grow, and he's about to become way less available on the waiver wire than 7.7% rostered across ESPN leagues. He's about to at least triple that number right there. So I do think that this is probably the time to jump on Ayomanor if you want to get a borderline flexible option on a weekly basis and your roster is not already completely set. I think Ayomanor is a good add. Cedric Tillman is the next wide receiver I want to talk about of the Cleveland Browns, and he is almost 50% rostered at 47%. Now, this one may seem like a no-brainer to go get Cedric Tillman this week. I think it's a little dangerous. So he was not the wide receiver 1 in Cleveland this week, as opposed to last week when it was basically a dead split between Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman on routes run, snap counts, and targets. This was not the same scenario this week right here. And Cedric Tillman is in this spot where he gets way less volume and way less efficiency this week on his work, but he gets in the end zone. This is a fool's gold situation right here. We cannot forget Cleveland's offense is one that is just not super fantasy rich. And I get it. Joe Flacco, a lot of people are excited about that in fantasy. And while I do think he's their best quarterback option for fantasy, we were proven on Sunday that he's still not a great quarterback for fantasy either. The guy's in his 40s and he can't move. He threw for 199 yards, a touchdown and a pick. It was 25 of 45 for completions. He is not that great of a quarterback. So I am not convinced still that Cleveland is a good place for a wide receiver 2 on their own team for fantasy football. I think Cedric Tillman is a little bit of a landmine this week. And I think that Hunter Renfro is also more of a landmine. Now, I will say this. He does have utility as a full PPR wide receiver, but there's another wide receiver we're going to go through here in a minute that I think has more utility to be that and is going to be more consistent at it. Hunter Renfro this past week against the Arizona Cardinals was actually really productive. He had a really good week, and he was really their only legitimate other option outside of Ted McMillan. First of all, Xavier Legette is not good. I think that ship is honestly almost sailing over in Carolina right now because Xavier Legette, out of 55 passes that Bryce Young threw, caught 1 ball for -2 yards. Not a good look. So Hunter Renfro benefits on the day. 7 catches for 48 yards and 2 touchdowns. But I will say this again. 55 pass attempts for Bryce Young because this team was trailing the entire game. This is not something that's consistently reliable right here. And I get it. If you've seen Hunter Renfro in previous years do really well in fantasy, this may feel like a sort of attractive ad at a player that is being 1.7% rostered right now in leagues. But I think an even more attractive player who fits the similar billing of a full PPR consistent play is actually Wan'Dale Robinson of the New York Giants. Wan'Dale Robinson is someone that I've discussed over many years of being a very solid play in a PPR league. Because Wan'Dale, if you remember last year, had like 140 targets on the entire season. The guy has always been important in this offense to a certain degree. Now, what he has never been is a downfield player. And I will say this, Russell Wilson's day, very similar to Bryce Young's day on Sunday, is not replicable. You cannot count on a repeat from Russell Wilson because what he did was vintage a little bit. 41 pass attempts, 30 completions, 450 yards through the air, 3 touchdowns and a pick. Wan'Dale Robinson had a long touchdown catch, 8 catches for 142 yards and a touchdown on the day. Now again, this is not something you can consistently rely on. But what you can rely on every week from Wan'Dale is a guy that's going to get out there and give you about 7 to 10 targets on a weekly basis. A lot of his times, his stat line is going to be 5 catches for 50 yards. But that's okay because if you are looking in the direction of a solid PPR play, I would much rather pick up Wan'Dale, a younger, more talented player with, in my opinion, not that worse of a quarterback than Bryce Young, than I would pick an older player who is still coming off of basically being retired for the last couple of years. I think Wan'Dale Robinson is that type of guy that you would rather have on your team for a full PPR play than somebody like a Hunter Renfro. Now, having said all that, I think the biggest pickups of the week are going to be our tight ends right here. There's 3 tight ends that you need to roster immediately to figure out your tight end position because I know we all struggle with it throughout the season of fantasy. Juwan Johnson is the first guy. This guy is a no-brainer pickup at this point. 48.2% rostered, and he has another good day today. Now, he gets in the end zone, so it makes his day a little bit better, but this guy realistically is going to continue to be a very, very important target for Spencer Rattler in this New Orleans Saints offense because of the fact that they just don't realistically have that much talent, and they're going to be trailing in a lot of games, so where Spencer Rattler has to throw a bunch, Juwan Johnson is going to be that guy that's going to step in a bunch. Zach Ertz, also I don't think should be on waiver wires. As much as I don't like to watch Zach Ertz continue to be good in fantasy, not because I don't like him, but because I want to see Ben Sinnott, the backup tight end, do good. We're not going to see that right now because Zach Ertz is still his safety blanket for Jaden Daniels. And he proved it on Thursday night when he went to Green Bay and he ended up having 6 catches for 64 yards and a receiving touchdown. Zach Ertz is definitely a guy that is going to help you figure out the tight end position. And Harold Fannin, I had said this throughout the entire buildup of week 2, that I believe that Harold Fannin was not a necessary pickup for everybody. But he is 27.7% rostered, and you can guarantee that that number is only going to continue to go up. Because what we continue to see in Cleveland, and the reason I think it's actually viable, is they're using 2 tight end sets. So they want Harold Fannin involved, and he was involved. 5 catches for 48 yards and no receiving touchdowns. 2 weeks straight now has outproduced David Njoku in fantasy football. And while Njoku is still on the field, still important in the passing game, it is clear that they want Harold Fannin involved. So you could basically liken this situation to a little bit of a watered down version of Baltimore when Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews are both on the field together. I think Harold Fannin could easily start to take over David Njoku, but we're not there yet. But at this time, I do believe that he'll help a lot of teams because the work is getting consistent at this point. So let me know what moves you're going to be making in Week 3 fantasy football, and make sure to stay tuned for the buy low video.